Could the Miami Hurricanes get left out of the realignment shuffle?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest story in the greatest sport on planet Earth, that be college football. Of course, realignment, the coaching carousel, the transfer portal. We've got all that and more every day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment no more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get yourselves started. We'll get to why LSU has to make the playoff and the best value dark horse on the FanDuel gambling odds in every Power 4 conference. Yeah, fascinating stuff. Let's start with Miami, though. Miami in the realignment space is a curious cat, shall we say. Because if you just say Miami, they should be a school who could never possibly be left behind in a conference that is doomed to just regress into irrelevance or oblivion, or one that could disperse and, blow up altogether, a la the Pac-12. That doesn't sound right, yet it's entirely possible. I'm not saying likely, Hurricanes fans. This isn't cause for alarm. This is cause to put in your mind that something has to be done here. These chess pieces need to move in a way that allows us to, not have to make the Ron Weasley sacrifice in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. You don't want to be put in that situation, but Miami could get there. How? Whichever conference Florida State ends up joining decides Clemson is the right one. That's the team they'd want to pair with the Seminoles. Because if that happens, Miami would certainly be clamoring to get into the Power 2, or at least they should be. Could they get the money to leave the ACC? Maybe that depends on how much Florida State ends up negotiating an exit fee for. And if that standard applies to every other school, I would think it does. It's the same grant of rights. It's the same contract. But I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to assume anything there. I'll just project what would make sense. But if the number comes out to, let's just say, as a random guess, $150 million, and Miami decides that's worth it to go into the Big Ten, can make that back in the long run, break even at the very least, maybe take a little bit of a hit, but at the very least will be included at the Power 2, they better decide that that's worth it. But the Big Ten or the SEC, remember, this is a two-way street. They have to see Miami as a sufficiently valuable commodity. Now, when it comes to their television market and their brand and their potential, yeah, I think Miami brings something to the table. What they haven't brought recently are on-field results. And Mario Cristobal going into his third year with the Hurricanes, certainly, this is the biggest expectations year he's ever had. Their win total, according to FanDuel, is 9.5. But if he turns things around and gets things rolling down there the way that he did when he was the head coach at Oregon and continues to recruit at a high level, Miami could look more attractive to the Big Ten or the SEC. But if the SEC decides, you know what, we want to just dominate the state of Florida. We are the best recruiting conference in America. Fact check true. They've had the number one recruiting class in the Southeastern Conference now 16 years in a row, is I believe the number. It's been the best recruiting league in the country. If they decide they want to, as they, along with the Big Ten, are starting to pull away financially and just power structure-wise in college football, if they want to go and dominate recruiting even more from the high school ranks, they could decide, we're taking all the power programs out of the state of Florida. We're not worried about UCF. We're not worried about FAU or FIU for that matter. No. We just want Florida State, already have Florida, and we'll take Miami as well. There would need to be a fourth team. That would perhaps be Clemson. That would be a big-time, aggressive move by Greg Sankey, who I don't think has exactly been prone to being afraid of such a move. But that's the best case scenario, is if Miami gets included. They're not leading the lawsuit. They're not a target right now the way that Florida State is, because that's at the top of everyone's wish list. And you know the best case for Miami? The best case for Miami to help insure themselves, just because of the numbers, that they get included in the next massive round of realignment that Florida State leaving the ACC is going to set off. And look, that could happen in a couple weeks. That could happen in a couple years. That's for the lawyers to decide. The best case for Miami, though, is if Notre Dame decides they want to join a conference. Because here's a move that could happen. Neither conference, to me, is assured to want to add 4 schools. But what if you could go 2 and 2? What if Notre Dame decides, you know what? We'll survive. We want the bye and the opportunity to get an auto bid more than we want to have a playoff game at home for more revenue, to stand out because we're Notre Dame. Well, if that were the case, the conference that, legally speaking, they'd be tied to is the ACC. But if Florida State is able to get out of that, then certainly Notre Dame would be able to, seeing as how in the football sense, they haven't even joined the ACC before. If Florida State and Notre Dame became available, the Big Ten would welcome them with open arms. And the SEC, perhaps to try and keep pace in the realignment world, which is what this is all about at some level, the Big 12 and the ACC can't do it. They can't keep pace. We're past the point of no return on that front. The Big Ten and the SEC are pulling away. But if the Big Ten makes a move like that, do you think Greg Sankey's just going to sit there? Do you think he's going to look at the remaining teams in the ACC and go, well, you know, we'll just stamp it? You've got Clemson and Miami over there. You could have a 2-2 split. Maybe one conference decides we want to have all 4. But the advantage that Miami could have compared to a North Carolina, for instance, is there's no program that they'd be tied at the hip to. And one of the obstacles to North Carolina being a realignment target for a conference, most likely the Big Ten, perhaps the SEC, but probably they feel more like a Big Ten school to me, is that North Carolina State would have to go with them because there are ties within, it's my understanding, that there are legal ties in the North Carolina legislature that NC State and North Carolina have to remain together. I also recall a provision in which Cal, as in UC Berkeley, you don't think of them as a UC sort of school, but they are. UC Berkeley, Cal, and UCLA were tied at the hip, and UCLA left Cal behind. And you know what? They had to pay what's called calimony. I think they're going to continue paying what's known as quote-unquote calimony because they left them behind in the realignment space. So could they get out of that? Could North Carolina get out of that sort of arrangement with NC State the way that UCLA did with Cal? Perhaps. It seems like all you need is the will and the financial support, and you can do almost anything you want. But as these realignment chess pieces move around on the board, there's absolutely a scenario in which Miami gets left behind. And that scenario is Florida State is paired with Clemson, Notre Dame stands pat, and there's no logical team to pair with Miami. I don't think a conference is going to have an odd number of teams. Makes things rather difficult. And does anybody need Miami right now? Is Miami such a valuable commodity to add in the football or any other sport? But football is, of course, what's driving all this sort of stuff. Are they a must-add in the way that Florida State would be? That Clemson arguably could be? And I know Clemson feels like they're on the decline. They just went 9-4, and that's their down year. That's the worst year Dabo's had in a while. Their win total on FanDuel is 9.5. Same as Miami, worthy of note. They play in the same conference at least for one more year. But the years after that could all change. And Miami, they could get included. They absolutely could. But if Notre Dame stands pat, Miami could get left behind. Would come down to who the Big Ten or SEC would want to target to pair with Florida State, and maybe who Florida State wants to move around conferences with. So, that's Miami. What about LSU? LSU's not moving conferences. No, they're not doing anything ridiculous like that because they have, some sanity in the world. There is some sanity in the world, I should say, that LSU will continue to play in the Southeastern Conference. They have to make the playoff in 2024. And you have to check out Robinhood. So, did you know that if you have a 401k retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. This episode of Locked On College Football also brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. So, Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies, TV episodes, everything, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, college basketball, you're going to want to have a Fire TV with March Madness right around the corner. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, Major League Baseball, and more, with great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV to learn more. Let's go to Baton Rouge. Not literally. That would be, logistically challenging to coordinate because hopefully plenty of you are watching or listening to this particular segment. Thanks for doing that, by the way. The LSU Tigers have to make the playoff. Got to make the playoff this year. Now, I say that, and your first thought might be, and then what? And then fire Brian Kelly, who's 20-7 in his 2 years as LSU's head coach, who's got a contract that runs through 2031 that's among the most lucrative in all of college football? Would you fire Brian Kelly if he doesn't make the playoff this year? No, I wouldn't. But the conversations would start to get rolling. I'm not saying Brian Kelly goes to the hot seat. Let's say his seat is rather cold right now. It's very cold. It would get room temperature, right? It would go from frozen solid to room temperature if LSU misses the playoff this year. He would not move into the hot seat. He would definitely move into the, let's talk about it. Or you got to make the playoff in 2025 or it's hot seat time. Because that would be 4 years without a playoff appearance at LSU. And is that acceptable? In the 12-team era? Now, 2 of those years would be in the 4-team playoff. That's a lot harder to make. I'll grant you that. He took over a tough situation and has rebuilt and reestablished the standard that LSU has historically had. A program that has won a national title multiple times this century. There aren't very many programs that can say that, by the way. They are few and far between. Now, Brian Kelly has not won a national championship himself, but is certainly capable of doing so at LSU. And you obviously can't do that if you don't get to the playoffs. So if Brian Kelly and LSU don't make the playoff this year, I think fans are going to start to look around and say, What are we doing here? Like these aren't bad results. Let's say LSU goes 9-3, misses the playoff. Well, it's not a bad season. It's not, Ed Orgeron's last year or anything of that sort. It's just not what we'd like it to be. So the question then becomes, has LSU made the offseason moves to get to the playoff? Yes. Yeah, the answer there is an unequivocal yes, they have. A couple wide receivers to take note of, because Garrett Nussmeier is expected to be the quarterback down there for the LSU Tigers, and that's someone who has immense potential, who has been patiently waiting in the era of transferring out and not staying committed to a school amidst a coaching change and everything like that. Garrett Nussmeier, that guy is an LSU Tiger through and through. And I'll get to Garrett Nussmeier more here in just a second. But when you lose a player of Malik Neighbors' caliber, you ask the question, well, is there going to be a huge drop-off? There'll be some sort of drop-off. But is LSU and their new quarterback going to be light on weapons? No, they're not. Xavier Thomas comes over from Mississippi State. C.J. Daniels, I tell you what, I think SEC fans are going to get to know C.J. Daniels pretty darn well in 2024. He comes over from Liberty, where he was playing under Jamie Chadwell, who's a very good college football coach, by the way. He is the only coach, to my knowledge, over the last 2 years to win a conference title in 2 different leagues in consecutive seasons. Coastal Carolina and then Liberty last year in Conference USA. Not too shabby for Jamie Chadwell. But C.J. Daniels is a guy that I don't think he puts up Malik Neighbors sorts of numbers. But if you told me right now he has a 1,000-yard season, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked. He's got that sort of talent. The question is, what sort of chemistry can he develop with Garrett Nussmeier? And I'll go out on a limb with another flaming hot take and say that Nussmeier will not throw for almost 4,000 yards, run for over 1,100, and account for 50 touchdowns en route to winning the Heisman Trophy. The good news is for LSU to make the playoff, he doesn't need to sniff those numbers. He doesn't. He's got to be able to protect the football, and he's got to be able to create some explosive plays. And certainly LSU, with a new defensive staff we'll get to in just a moment, is going to be a different team, because I think they're going to be a better team. Now, does that mean that their offense will be as good as last year? No. But there wasn't as much. I've heard this about weight loss before. If you're trying to lose a lot of weight, depending on where you're starting from, the first, let's say, 40 pounds you lose are a lot easier to lose than the next 40 pounds. Like, if I wanted to lose 20 pounds, which would be difficult for me because I don't weigh a ton, but certainly I could drop 20 pounds, maybe. Then I'd be a little light. Let's say 10. Let's say I want to lose 10 pounds. The first 5 are going to be a lot easier to lose than the next 5. This sort of thinking applies to LSU's offense and defense, because LSU's defense, specifically, was really bad last year. It was very bad. The LSU Ole Miss game is burn the tape and then some. Whatever you can do, you got to go full TED 2 on that. The way they destroy a particular laptop whose contents I shall not repeat on this show because we're family friendly here at the Locked On Network. That's what needed to happen with the defensive tape in that LSU Ole Miss game last season. So LSU's defense isn't going to be under Blake Baker, their new defensive coordinator, who was there a couple years ago, just had a great year at Missouri, helped the Tigers have an 11-win season. That's going to improve. The question is how much? Is it going to be the best defense Blake Baker ever has as LSU's defensive coordinator? If he's the guy that we think he is, probably not. But you can improve that defense a lot faster than you can improve LSU's offense, which really can't get that much better from a season ago, because the first 5 are a lot easier to lose than the next 5 or the last 5. That's just the way it works. You can come in and make baseline changes right off the bat. I think Blake Baker will be able to do that. And certainly with LSU's roster, he's not going to be void of talent down there. I mean, as you go through LSU's schedule, how many times are they going to be out-talented on the field? I don't know. Once? Maybe none in the first 5. USC, Nicholls, South Carolina, UCLA, South Alabama, nope. Ole Miss, maybe. I think Ole Miss's roster is great. There's one. Texas A&M? That's probably beauty is in the eye of the beholder right there. Alabama, yeah, okay, maybe Bama. Maybe. Not definitively, but that's it. Everybody else, Florida, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, Arkansas, that's only 2 teams that you can definitively say, yeah, they've got a better roster than Ole Miss. So Blake Baker inherits a team that allowed 28 points per game last year. It doesn't need to go down to 15. It doesn't need to be 10. Just get it down to like the low 20s. And if Garrett Nussmeier, with his new weapons, is able to repeat the offensive success at an 85% clip of what they were a season ago, LSU will be a playoff team. But if Brian Kelly wants to avoid at least some murmurs, at least a little bit of light chatter, shall we say, he's got to be able to make the playoff. And with this schedule, he should be able to. This is a very favorable schedule. A lot will be decided week 1 in that game, September 1st in Las Vegas against USC. Oh boy, big implications going both ways. Every single conference has got a dark horse contender. Every single Power 4 conference has got multiple dark horse contenders, by the way. I'm going to give you the best one in every single league after I talk to you about Nissan. Because the Houston Cougars are the Nissan Armada. Because in this week's March Madness bracket highlight, brought to you by our friends at Nissan, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to make it to the next level. The Cougars are the Armada. They're as hardcore as it gets. No wonder they're having so much success in their first season in the Big 12. The Tennessee Vols, they're the Nissan Pathfinder. Thrilling to watch and have created a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC. Player of the Year candidate Dalton Knecht, formerly at Northern Colorado in the Big Sky, by the way. He's carried the Vols all season and made them a team to watch in March. The Utah State Aggies are this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us with a powerful performance against New Mexico, giving them their first outright Mountain West title in program history. How about that? They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Aggies have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop at nissanusa.com. That's nissanusa.com. It's time to talk dark horses. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4. The number of consecutive championships the Heatles appeared in, but they won just the 2, of course. So, in every league, you got those teams that are frisky when it comes to contending for the title, and the odds market reflects that. I am categorizing anyone as being a dark horse in a Power 4 conference. I wish there were other conference title odds out there, but guess what? We don't have the full lineup yet from our friends at FanDuel. Can't wait for when we do, though. So, a dark horse is anyone whose conference championship odds before the year are plus 1,000 or higher. Let's start in the Big Ten. USC. I mean, the odds are plus 2,300 that the Trojans win the Big Ten. I've discussed this multiple times before here on the show. Allow me to run through for those who are new here. Thanks so much for stopping by the channel, by the way. Lincoln Riley is going into year 3. He just had his worst season ever as a coach and beat the team that was the runners-up in the ACC with a backup quarterback. Okay, just so we're clear. I know the narrative is that Lincoln Riley stinks, he's a bum, he doesn't know defense and whatnot. Oh, by the way, he's got a new defensive coordinator by the name of D'Anton Lynn, who's very good, and was just with a coach in the same town, ironically, who calls the plays and doesn't give a lick about defense historically. That was Chip Kelly. Well, Lincoln Riley, in many ways, resembles what Chip Kelly has been and what Chip Kelly was back in the early 2010s. Because if you didn't know, Chip Kelly did not do hardly anything, if anything at all, with the defensive side of the football during his original run with Oregon. Their defense coordinator, Nick Aliotti, was the unsung hero of Oregon rising to national prominence. And if USC wins the Big Ten this year, D'Anton Lynn better not be the unsung hero. He won't be the unsung hero on this show. And does he have the personnel to match? Yeah, he does. You bring in all conference caliber players from across the Pac-12. You've got some existing talent on that USC team. This is eerily similar to what I was talking about with Blake Baker at LSU. D'Anton Lynn can make great defenses at USC. He'll have the recruiting potential, and he will have the administrative authority to run that side of the ball how he wants without interference from the head coach, or at least excessive interference from the head coach. So he just did an amazing job with UCLA. He can do that again with USC. His best defense probably won't be in year one. Maybe it'll be 2 or 3. But is it going to be noticeably better than last year? Yeah, it is. And is there ever a doubt? Does anyone ever actually question whether or not Lincoln Riley is going to be able to, score points? I don't question that. Plus 2,300. The FanDuel betting odds, just so we're all aware here, in the Big Ten, go like this. Ohio State plus 155, Oregon plus 250, Michigan plus 460, Penn State plus 600, USC plus 2,300. That caliber, that qualifies as a dark horse in my view, so I'll take USC in the Big Ten. Let's go to the SEC. Let's go to the SEC, where the Missouri Tigers SEC title odds are plus 1,500. Again, we're talking dark horse candidates here. Is Missouri going to sneak up on anybody like they did last year? No, they're not. Their win total. Do you know what Missouri's win total is? I'm just checking to see if it's shifted here, because last I looked, it was 9.5. Oh, look, it's still 9.5. The Missouri Tigers. You know what makes Missouri such a fascinating dark horse player in the SEC? They returned their head coach and their quarterback. Now, they lost their defensive coordinator. Don't love that. Do you know how many teams in the SEC returned both their head coach and their quarterback from the previous season? It's few and far between. Now, one of them is the Florida Gators. And am I very high on Florida? Not particularly. Their schedule's brutal. Their quarterback's just okay. Their roster is solid, but it's not near the top of the SEC. But Florida brings back their coach and quarterback, and Missouri does, and Ole Miss does, and go up and down. Texas does, and oh yeah, that's it. that is it. I can't forget Georgia, of course. Georgia brings back their head coach and quarterback. It's not a very common thing in this world of college football. You can go around and look at the national title contenders, the teams with the lowest national championship odds. Georgia, same coach and quarterback. Ohio State, different. Texas, same. Oregon, different. Alabama, different. LSU, different. Those are your top 6. 4 of them have got either a different coach or a different quarterback. That's the world of college football. And that is a really great advantage for a team to have. Missouri, dark horse, plus 1,500. Yeah, that's my number one dark horse in the SEC. Let's go over to the ACC. Who would be the best dark horse? I can't even, I just got to get, it's NC State. It is NC State plus 1,300 here. Incredible value on Dave Dorn and company. Look, the ACC is good at the top, at least on the surface. You've got a trio of teams that everyone expects to contend for the ACC title. Florida State, Miami, Clemson. That's what Vegas thinks. That's what fans would probably think. And Dave Doran and NC State going for his first ever 10-win season. I think they could do it, by the way. I've talked about them before here on the show. NC State has had a great offseason, adding quality players from the portal, replacing guys who left via the transfer portal, oftentimes to go to lower caliber schools. You bring in Grayson McCall, who is a veteran quarterback and a darn talented one, coming over from Coastal Carolina. I like what Dave Doran and company are doing right there. Do not write off the Wolfpack there. Have them at the top of your mind, as a matter of fact, as the dark horse in the ACC, because that's the team that I'm watching over there. And finally, to round things out in the Power 4, let's go to the Big 12. Is there a more up and down team so far? Could you have 2 years so vastly different in your first 2 years as a head coach than what Sonny Dykes has had at TCU? Last year, TCU's defense, well, it wasn't always great. The offense wasn't always something to write home about either. They just weren't that good. They were 5-7 in a Big 12 conference that, frankly, was not overtly difficult. Now, they had some close games. They played Texas tight, and, it's not as if it was a complete disaster, but they missed a bowl game. National championship game appearance, bowl game. Not even a part of it. Couldn't get into one. Couldn't play in the Pinstripe Bowl, the Cheez-It Bowl, the Pop-Tart Bowl. TCU wasn't good enough there. Their odds to win the Big 12, plus 1,600, fairly long. I'm more than a little interested to see what Sonny Dykes, who's got a good track record on offense, does on that side of the ball. I am even more interested in their defensive coordinator hire. Former Boise State head coach, and before that, Oregon defensive coordinator Andy Avalos, is now in Fort Worth, Texas. Did you know that? Well, now you do, if you did not before. And Avalos, the last time he was a DC, he was very good. He was very, very good. So if you're talking teams that have got odds of over plus 1,000 preseason to win the conference, I like TCU as my number one dark horse in the Big 12. NC State in the ACC, Missouri in the SEC, and USC in the Big 10. The Trojans at plus 2,300. Them some long odds for a team that is going to be better than people think. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Enjoy the weekend. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.